really excited to add Nick to the team. Um, Real interesting story with him. Guy who came into Washington, um, probably you could say under recruited. Went to one of the premier programs in the Pac-12 and really the nation. Um, and all he did was work his way into the starting lineup as a true freshman, and then start his final 3 years, one at guard, two at center. So a guy who's had a really productive career, um, and I think adds some good depth to the roster and a chance to compete. So
Excellent. That's great, Adam. We're going to open up for questions. We'll start off with Tom Withers.
Adam, thanks. I see you're based in Seattle, so you're probably you've probably seen Nick play a lot.
Yep.
Do you see him more as a center or a guard? And obviously that versatility is what made him so appealing to you guys.
I think for Nick, center is going to be where he starts, I'd imagine, and really where he shined at Washington. But he has played at multiple spots. Certainly, I think his lack of height, he's only 6'1",
right,
might have caused some people to think that maybe he can't play at multiple spots, but he's done it on the biggest stage. I mean, as a true freshman, he was playing guard against Alabama in the CFP playoffs and holding his own against guys who have gone on to be, productive NFL players. So these guys certainly adds ability and depth to the roster.
And the fact that he was kind of underrated and overlooked, if you will, what does that mean in terms of character, and how much is that appealing to you guys as well, that he has, kind of proven himself?
Certainly. I think he fits that smart, tough, accountable mantra that Kevin and Andrew have been hitting on throughout this process. He's a guy who he came in and earned his way every step of the way. Did not redshirt as a freshman. They pulled his redshirt because of how they couldn't keep him off the field, really. So guy who really worked his way and worked for everything he's got. Came in, he was in the 270s as a true freshman. He's up in the 300 range now. So he's done a lot throughout the course of his career to improve every step of the way every year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Daryl, you're up.
Just kind of curious if you could kind of go through what, from a scouting perspective, what makes a real strong interior offensive lineman, and why you see him as a perfect fit for this new blocking scheme.
Yeah, I think probably it varies when you're talking scheme to scheme, but certainly for what we're trying to do in a wide zone system, Nick is a guy with really good feet, good quickness, really good range in terms of getting out in space, getting to the second level. A guy who really, there's not a block he doesn't think he can make, and quite often, he makes them. He played on a line that had some other highly touted prospects, so people have been paying attention to this line for a few years, and every game he makes a play or two, a block or two, where you kind of sit up in your chair and take notice, which is usually, offensive linemen are guys that you're not noticing them unless they do something, wrong in some instances. And he's a guy who he would do things right and make you take notice of it.
Thank you, Daryl. Nate Ulrich, your turn.
Hey, how big of a deal was him being at the Senior Bowl for you guys and your evaluation of him? And, the tight end that you guys just picked in the previous round, Harrison Bryant, mentioned how he thought the Senior Bowl was a really big deal for him, and he thought that it was relevant that Alex Van Pelt was one of the coaches there. So did any of that apply to this pick as well?
I think in general, the opportunity to go to the Senior Bowl is just another feather in your cap, another chance to go down and compete at a high level. But for Nick, he's a guy who competed against the best of the best throughout his career. I mean, he went against Auburn, who has some really good defensive linemen last year in their opener. He went against Alabama. He went against the best teams in the Pac-12. So he was not a guy who necessarily you needed to see at the Senior Bowl to see him go against the top competition. But whenever you get a chance to go to the Senior Bowl and compete, that always helps.
Great. And Scott Petrick, your turn.
Adam, you mentioned Nick's lack of height to some people, and maybe that affected his draft status. How much do you guys value that and look at that when you think, okay, can he play guard or is he strictly a center?
Honestly, where he ends up is going to be a coach decision. But from the perspective of the line, it's not a competition about who's taller. It's about a leverage battle. And for Nick, he plays with great leverage, and he's got some natural leverage, and he really is a tough guy to get around because of his combination of leverage and quickness and athleticism. So wherever he ends up, I think for him, the height is less of an issue. Certainly, he also has length in his arms, so it's not as if he doesn't have an ability to play with extension or leverage.
Thanks.
All right, thank you, Scott. Next up, we will go to Mary Kay.
Hey, Adam. Would you say that he's sort of maybe like a long range replacement for JC Treader, or somebody that can come in and kind of push him a little bit now, or how are you viewing what he can do for you guys?
I think for all these guys, it's a chance for them to come in and compete and add depth to the roster. Where they, ultimately end up is to be determined by them, and their performance. So all the guys we bring in, it's an opportunity for them to be on the Cleveland Browns. And from here, what they make of it is really going to be determined by them and their performance. But certainly, he's a guy that we thought he had a really good fit for our scheme and a nice skill set and ability to come in and add depth and value.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mary Kay. And now to Marla.
Hi, I noticed that Nick won the most inspirational player award last season. Anything that you picked up on as to why that he earned that? Was it that what you were talking about the one or two blocks that you didn't think he could make kind of thing?
No, I think actually for Nick, it's really just the whole person. He's a guy that everybody in the program speaks highly of. Usually when we go to these all-star games, we get a chance to interact with many of the teammates of players at each school. So, you go and you talk to the guys from Washington and you say, hey, who's one guy that you'd like to bring with you to the next level? A lot of them said Nick Harris, and he was a team captain. For him, I think it was just more the person and the way he went about his business every day, competing, the energy and passion he brought to the field every day. You go out at practice, you can hear him, you can feel his energy. So he's certainly a guy that inspired his teammates, I'm sure, in a lot of ways, not just with his on-field performance.
Something I was reading said he was very vocal. So is it more just pumping up his guys, or will he chew them out sometimes too? You know what I mean? Like,
he was a team captain, and when you talk to people around the program, they'd say he's one of the best leaders they have. So I think it's a sort of a combination of everything. I think he really does bring a lot to the team, and for them as a program. And he was a guy who played a lot, and he did it with his actions, but he also did with his words. Sure.
thank you.
All right, thank you, Marla. Next up, we'll go to Dan Lobby.
Hey, Adam. Obviously, a lot has been made about this off season for everyone, and your guys' process throughout all of it. I'm just wondering what percentage of work usually is done for you guys by the time you even get to the off season? Like how important are the interviews and things like that, or do you have a pretty good idea of guys before you even get to the combine, all-star games, things like that?
It's a good question. It probably varies from player to player. Certainly, for a guy like Nick, who started for 3+ years, he's been on the radar for a while. You've heard about him for a while, and you've been watching him for a while. There are other guys who maybe later in the process they pop up, or they only started for 1 year, or they only had 1 year of production. So I think, person to person, player to player, there's some variance. But for him, he's a guy that we've been paying attention to for a while. Certainly I have. And you know, the rest of the process after the season ends is just to find out more, but not necessarily change a whole lot about what you think.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. We'll go to you, Nate.
Hey, Adam, not everybody can say they had a long-time NFL lineman as a high school coach. So have you talked to him about Pat Harlow and what kind of impact that made on him? And can you detect any signs that, he might be advanced a little bit as a result of that?
I have not talked to him about his high school coach in particular, but I think certainly that kind of instruction at a younger age helps. He's definitely somebody who came in ready to compete and to produce. And he did so, like I said, kind of coming in the Pac-12 at 270 some pounds and working his way into the starting lineup. So he definitely was ready early and has continued to improve throughout his career.
Great. We'll take one more. Scott Petrick, you can finish this session.
Great. Hey, we look at all these projections of where guys might go, and some of them had Nick going much higher than the 5th round. Were you guys surprised that he was still on the board at 160?
I'll probably leave the board discussion to AB, but certainly pleased that he was there. And I've gotten a few texts from guys on the West Coast excited and congratulating about the pick, because he was a guy that, quite frankly, a lot of people did like, and so excited to have him.